All right, let's talk about one of the most important documents you'll probably ever sign, your will. We all kind of think we know what it does, right? But the real story, the part that can honestly change everything for your family, isn't what a will can do, it's what it can't. So let's jump right in.
I mean, it all boils down to this one simple question, doesn't it? And for most people, the answer feels so obvious. Well, I'll just write a will and that takes care of it. The will is the boss, right? It calls all the shots.
And this is the core belief, isn't it? That a will is this ironclad final word that directs every single penny, every piece of property, exactly where you want it to go. I mean, it just feels like it should work that way. It's logical.
Well, that assumption is just wrong. Completely false. Look, a will is definitely powerful, but it is not all-powerful. Its authority has some very real, very important limits, and not knowing what they are can have a massive impact on what actually happens to your stuff.
Okay, so to really wrap our heads around what a will can't do, we first have to get crystal clear on what it's actually designed for. We're going to start with the basics, but don't worry, we'll move fast.
I want you to think of your will as a kind of instruction manual that's sitting on a shelf, powered off. While you're alive, it's basically just a piece of paper. It has absolutely zero power. The moment of death, that's the on switch that finally brings it to life. And once that switch is flipped, the manual has three main jobs to do. First, it names your executor. You can think of them as the project manager for your entire estate. Second, it says who gets what specific items. And third, it handles what's called the residue. That's just a fancy legal term for whatever's left over after all the debts, taxes, and specific gifts have been paid.
Okay, you ready for the first big eye-opener? Even with those three jobs, there are huge chunks of your financial life that your will literally cannot touch. These things operate on a totally different and, frankly, more powerful system.
The absolute best way to picture this is with an analogy, a secret tunnel. Certain assets are designed to go directly from you to another person, completely bypassing your entire estate. And if it bypasses the estate, it bypasses the will.
And here are the main culprits. You've got life insurance policies, registered accounts like RRSPs or TFSAs, as long as you've named a beneficiary, that is. Then there's property you own jointly with what's called a right of survivorship. All of these are basically contracts that legally override whatever your will might say. In this situation, the beneficiary form you signed is king.
So here's the bottom line, the thing you absolutely have to remember from this section. The will only gets to decide what happens to the assets that are left on the table after all those secret tunnel transfers have already happened. It doesn't get the first word, it gets the last word on whatever is left.
But wait, it gets even more complicated, because even when we're talking about the assets a will does control, its instructions still aren't absolute. Nope. There are times when a will has to bend to a higher legal authority. Let's see how that works.
You know, in places like Canada, there's this big legal principle called testamentary freedom. Now, in theory, that means you are totally free to leave your property to anyone you want. But, as you can probably guess from the screen, there's a huge asterisk next to that word, mostly. This is a perfect way to think about it. The law recognizes your freedom, sure, but it puts up these guardrails. It's to prevent that freedom from causing real harm to people you have a legal or even a moral duty to support. Society has basically decided that some responsibilities don't just disappear when you die.
And these are the main groups those guardrails are built to protect. Spouses and dependent children have really strong legal rights to claim support from an estate, no matter what you've written in your will. A court can step in, and very often does, to make sure they're taken care of.
Now, this is a really subtle but super important point. You could write a perfectly legal, totally valid will that, say, cuts out a dependent child. The will itself isn't thrown out, it's still a valid document. But a court can look at that one specific instruction and say, nope, we're not enforcing that, and declare it ineffective. The will still stands, but that one specific wish gets overruled.
So, with all these complex rules and exceptions flying around, how you actually create your will in the first place matters a lot. The path you choose can open you up to a whole world of risk.
So let's quickly compare. A handwritten will, it can work in a pinch, but they're often super unclear and really easy for people to fight over later. Those DIY will kits? Yeah, they're cheap, but they're just glorified fill-in-the-blanks forms. What's missing is the crucial part, professional judgment. The expertise to see the potential family drama, the tax problems, the conflicts. That's what you're really paying for with a formal will.
Okay, let's pull all these different pieces together now. To really get it, you need to see the whole map of the estate landscape,
just to understand where your will actually fits into the bigger picture.
You know, the number one mistake people make is thinking that the will is the entire map. It's not. It's just one single layer in a process with many, many layers. And as we're about to see, it's not even close to being the first or most important one.
So here it is, the real order of operations for your estate. Step 1, those secret tunnels, the joint assets and beneficiary payouts, happen first automatically. Step 2, the legal guardrails kick in, and any claims from spouses or dependents get sorted out. Step 3, all your creditors and the taxman get paid. And then, only then, all the way down at Step 4, does your will finally get to have its say on what's left.
So look, a will is absolutely a critical tool, but it's a tool that has to work inside a much bigger system. The biggest takeaway here is making sure that your beneficiary forms, the way you own property, and your will are all working together, that they're all telling the same story. So now that you have the real map, you have to ask yourself, is my will actually pointing where I think it is?